Share our similarities. Celebrate our differences. M. Scott Peck.
We lived in Guatemala, Colombia. We were in Sierra Leone. Our children, by that time, we had 3 children. And I asked them, of all the places we've lived, what do you like the most? And they said Sierra Leone. And I said, well, what is it about Sierra Leone? I mean, that's the toughest place. I'd never been to a more difficult place to live than Sierra Leone in West Africa. Each of them had their own monkey. And that was the key. They each had one of their own monkey.
He calls his enterprise Million Mile Walker, which is both a pun, his name after all is Mark Walker, but also a description of a decades-long journey that has taken him all over the world, always searching for a way to improve the lives of the people less fortunate than himself. I'm Christopher Wurst, and this is
Soft
Power.
Powerful.
Soft
Powerful.
Powerful stories.
Powerful.
Soft
Powerful. Stories.
I was brought up in Plainfield, New Jersey. My dad worked at J&J, Johnson & Johnson. My mom was a nurse, and we were within a block of my grandparents, the Hadleys. And George, he was a miner, and he was a merchant marine. When he was a merchant marine, he went around the world a number of times, and he brought back wooden shoes from Holland, little platform shoes from Japan, and what I enjoyed the most were innumerable coins from all over the world. They were square, they were round, they were oval. They had all kinds of different symbols and languages that I didn't understand. Some even had holes in the middle. And that, I think, was my first inkling of that broader world out there that I was totally unaware of. When I got to middle school, I was in what they called the higher level classes, and I never really understood exactly what that was. I assumed that somehow or another we were smarter, but one of the things I noticed was that even though Plainfield has a large black community, there were only 2 kids in my class of 30 or 35, and I always wondered what that was about. When I was 16, we moved out of New Jersey. We moved to Colorado, and my sister and I were watching television, and we witnessed the race riots, which were started and most brutal, I think, in Newark, New Jersey, but also in Plainfield. People burning cars and breaking into stores. I realized at that point that we weren't talking about an even field. There was a lot of inequality and injustice, and that experience stuck with me over the years.
At what point did it kind of occur to you that maybe there was a bigger world out there that you might have a role in?
I was a dorm advisor at Western. It was called Western State College at that time. And one day I was sitting at the barber shop, and I was talking to the barber about these books that I had just purchased. They're called the Great Books. They have all the classics and the annals of American history. It's just massive. But there was a guy there with white hair, very stately individual, and he started asking me questions. So I started explaining my love of reading and love of books, and eventually I asked him if he wanted to see the university, and I took him on campus, and he was really impressed. At the end of the day, he said, Mark, I'm looking for somebody to organize a youth program for my Law Science Academy. Well, this individual is Dr. Hubert Smith. I've never met anyone that graduated from Harvard Law and Medical School. Not only that, he got his MBA from the University of Texas. So the guy was a genius. He was a visionary. His vision was to bring the top doctors and lawyers together. Dr. Smith was my mentor, and he did something that really changed my life. He wrote a recommendation for the Peace Corps, and I think he understood me better than I did in my desire to go overseas and travel, etc. This was handwritten, It has been the prime satisfaction of my life to discover persons seeking to find and understand reality. For that reason, I gain a special pleasure when such a unique piece of raw material as Mark Walker shows up. He is searching day and night for truth, learning, and meaning, ready to fight for a better world rather than reject it because there are still unaddressed injustices. At heart, Mark Walker longs to travel, to see other lands, to identify with international view of human problems, to be a world citizen. They sent me first to Puerto Rico to learn Spanish and to get a job. So I had to get out there in the street and unload trucks and this sort of thing and try to learn some Spanish. And I remember being annoyed by the fact that they housed me with another volunteer in a middle-class home in Ponce, Puerto Rico. And really, their home was as nice as my home in the United States. So I complained. What happened was the Peace Corps sent me to one of the nastiest slums in Ponce. I had breakfast the first morning, and they served me fish heads. One thing that I did learn in the slum is I started to develop an impressive set of linguistic capabilities, not in Spanish, but I learned all of the foul language and all the dirty words that any of these people knew because they enjoyed teaching me. We were there during Christmas, and I remember several of the volunteers invited me to go with them with one of the families that had a yacht, and they were going to go to St. Thomas. And I said, thanks, but no thanks, and I stayed. And they have a tremendous tradition there. At night, they get their guitars out, they start singing, you go from house to house. Every house has a little glass of liquor that they give you. At the end, they have this big lechon, which is a stuffed pig. And so I had a fabulous time. I learned a lot of things I wouldn't have learned. At the end of my experience, they sent me to a place called Ixijuan in the highlands of Guatemala. Now, this is right next to the highest volcano in Central America. And I chose that site specifically because I didn't want anybody that spoke English. When I got there, nobody knew I was coming. Everybody spoke Mom because there are 22 different languages in the country, and I barely understood Spanish. And they put me up at this room that had big holes around the side, and it was freezing. I mean, we were at 10,000 feet. I realized Ixijuan was not the place for me, so I found a little community called Calapte, about 30 minutes below Ixijuan. And that's where I sort of set up shop. Whenever I would open the door to my room, which was right next to the school, and had no windows, once again, I'd open the door and immediately 10 or 15 children or students would come up and get right in the door because I had 2 or 3 maps on the wall.
Indigenous Mayan communities in the Guatemalan highlands have preserved rich languages and traditions, despite centuries of marginalization and discrimination. The highlands alone are home to more than a dozen distinct Maya languages, each carrying its own history and worldview. Today, they continue to face entrenched poverty, land insecurity, and limited political representation, even as they lead powerful movements for cultural rights, environmental protection, and justice.
We were introducing fertilizer experiments to different parts of Guatemala to determine how we could help them introduce different varieties of crops, in my case, potatoes and wheat, and then using fertilizer increase their production. And we even went to Honduras to introduce this program there. So I had an opportunity to go to several places countries, just as a Peace Corps volunteer. I remember getting up each morning and taking an extremely cold shower, walking out the door, watching the smoke filter out of the thatched roofs of there were about 30 or 40 homes there, and wondering, what are those people doing this morning? You could sense that acrid smell of wood because everybody had wood fires. They didn't have chimneys. That's why I say the smoke just drifts out of the thatched roofs. But once again, there was a lot going on that I didn't understand. So that morning, I went down to a little home with a lady, Doña Martita, and she was the one who would make my meals. So I paid her 25 cents a day. And one morning, I was really disturbed. I didn't get my egg with my beans and my tortillas. Well, fortunately, my Spanish was so bad that I couldn't really articulate that without really embarrassing myself and her. And as I was there drinking my coffee, her children start coming in, and there were 8 of them. And finally, it dawned on me, well, wait a second. I'm the only one who ever gets an egg. The lady that fixed my meals, Martha, she realized one day that I hadn't turned up for breakfast, and I hadn't turned up for 2 days. The fact was, I was deathly ill. I had a high temperature, some type of a nasty infection, and I couldn't even get out of bed. I was unprepared for this. The Peace Corps told me, well, if anything happens, we'll medevac you. We'll send a helicopter if necessary. Well, what none of us realized was, number one, they don't have a phone in Calapte. And guess what? The telegraph didn't work that day. So I was up a creek. Martha turns up with 2 other ladies, and they start treating me with some of their local herbs. Lo and behold, after a couple of days, I was good to go and climbed up to the road and eventually got back to the Peace Corps. But this was a lesson in how important local knowledge and culture is. And the fact that that the folks up there have developed their own technologies based on local resources that are proven to be successful. And also, it was just an appreciation that people, even though technologically they might not be up to where I'm used to, they had a lot of other really fabulous values and that sort of thing. But that Martha and her friend saved my life at that point.
Do you know what you had and what you took for it?
Well, I don't know what I took because it was local herbs. God only knows. It's a wonder. It really is. I definitely had a serious intestinal infection, which goes with the territory. I mean, that just happens. I mean, the local liquor up there in Ishiwan is called Ishbak. And I understand they use feces and during the production process. My savior and excuse for drinking so much beer was you weren't drinking the water. I was walking down to my experiments one day, and I walked through this area, and it had all of these little graves. Didn't have any names, just had little graves. And I wondered, what is going on? And I thought, well, maybe they're burying their dogs. Maybe a week later, there was this big celebration, and there were marimbas, everybody was drinking, they were having a great time. And so I asked the school teacher where I was staying the next day what was going on. And he said, well, we're celebrating the Angelitos. And these are the children that died before their first birthday, but they were blessed because they died without sinning. They were pure souls. And I realized at that point, what a different worldview, what a tragedy as well, that you would have to sort of celebrate the death of these children as maybe a way to sort of deal with the tragedy. I don't know. But it was really a wake-up call for me on how different they would perceive certain things. I realized that promoting, social change was going to be a lot more complicated than I dreamed possible. I mean, here I am, I'm thinking, well, how are we going to enhance their nutrition level and their quality of life, their agricultural production? And yet we have this ongoing cycle of death of children before their first year.
Guatemala is a very dramatic place, and you saw very, stark poverty, and then you saw amazing kindness from people. What was your relationship with Guatemala? When did you really start falling in love with that place? Because I know it's become.
Well, I started by falling in love with the local girl in San Jeronimo because the Peace Corps wouldn't send me back to Calate. So they sent me to San Jeronimo, which is a beautiful place in Baja Verapaz, nice flat land. I saw this beautiful Guatemalan strawberry blonde riding a white horse in the middle of town. I asked my buddy Adolfo, who is that lovely lady? And he says, don't even think about it, gringo. You're not in her class at all. Forget about it. But I kept on him, and eventually he introduced me, and I met Likia. We eventually got married. We were actually married when I was still a Peace Corps volunteer, which is definitely a no-no. But, of course, I forgot to tell them. As a matter of fact, our first child was born within a few blocks of the Peace Corps office, and incidentally, we didn't invite any of the staff.
I feel like a subtitle for this program could be called Peace Corps Volunteers Coming Clean on All the Rules They Broke Back in the Day. To what do you attribute your success in wooing this woman that you saw on horseback?
It took me a while to get to know her. I asked her, where did you go to school? And I was thinking, maybe she had a basic education. Well, it ends up she not only got her degree, but she got a separate degree in engineering. So then I asked her, well, what do you do for fun? And she says, oh, I love the theater, and I love the opera, and I love Carmen Barona. And I'm thinking, Carmen who? So she was a teacher. She had 2 degrees. She loved theater. I was definitely out of my class. So we took some trips down to the lake, to Amatitlan, and we started to get acquainted. Eventually, I visited with her grandfather's coffee plantation, and we got even better acquainted. Her family kept calling me orejas, which is ears. So I asked Likia, what is this ears thing about? And she says, well, my family member, they all know that you're part of the CIA, and you're listening.
And how long have you been married?
53 years, 3 children, and 8 grandkids.
So I think the statute of limitations is up on that. I think you're safe.
Exactly. 8 years ago, we organized a trip to Guatemala for our kids. And this was their reintroduction to Guatemala. In the middle of this visit, we had a small gathering with Likia's family. So just like the wedding, when she said it was only the immediate family and 80 people arrived, there were 50 people at this lavish dinner and this event, which was a lot of fun for them and really reconnected them. And then it occurred to us, we have 8 grandchildren. We really need to begin to get our grandchildren reconnected with Guatemala and really help them to learn other languages and appreciate other culture. And eventually, they'll be good global citizens.
I wanted to ask you if there is a through line that you identify from the time that you first landed in Guatemala as a young Peace Corps volunteer through the work that you've done post-Peace Corps right up until this day. Is there something from that time that you have carried with you?
Yeah, I think an appreciation of the injustices and inequality that exist in Guatemala. That was always something that I thought about, and it really is obvious in Guatemala, where almost 50% of your population is Mayan, and yet only 8 or 9 of the legislators are Mayans. And they're usually ignored, and they aren't allowed to speak their own language at school or learn their own language. They don't have opportunities for good jobs. The schools, the healthcare system is abominable. And of course, these are all some of the issues that underlie the ongoing migration. So that's the ongoing reality of Guatemala. That's why I spend a lot of time writing stories about the injustices, about the violence. That reality, that appreciation, that knowledge is stuck with me. In my most recent book, I really focused on what Guatemalans had to say about that, because I've been writing about it over the years, but what the Guatemalan Mayan leaders have to say about the reality, what's happening, and what they're going to try to do about it to make changes.
Well, that means we are coming to the close of this episode. But first, I want to give Mark the chance to respond to our Aunt Deb.
Why should I spend my money on poor Guatemalans when there is so much poverty and homelessness in the United States?
Well, I never had a dubious aunt. What I did have were a lot of dubious donors, and they would ask me that question constantly. Why should we spend our money when there's so much homelessness and problems right here? So this is where I would explain it's to our advantage to get to know people from other countries. We really have a responsibility to help people in countries, especially where our own government's policies have had a negative impact on them. And it opens us up to a better world where we're actually helping other people as opposed to just looking for sort of benefiting ourselves. As an executive fundraiser, I spent 35 years answering questions from donors who had to make the choice between, in some cases, their next Porsche or sending money for health care to help children in a country they didn't know existed. So here's the way I dealt with it. Most of the people I deal with are Christians, and I've also been with Christian groups. So there's some basic precepts that I use and I focus on. One is the Bible tells us to care for the poor, to care for the sick, to welcome the strangers, and to be kind to prisoners. My personal favorite, since I've worked on hunger-related issues, is Matthew 25, I was hungry and you gave me food. So over the years, I've been working to engage donors, to get them involved, to oftentimes take them overseas, and to try to be sure they meet the overseas staff and they can ask their tough questions and let them talk about what their shared vision is and how they're going to implement that in the field and actually pay for it. I learned something at that point about donors and trips. My wife said, you can't continue to take people to just the slums and the most isolated, poor parts of my country. Guatemala is a beautiful country. You need to take them up to Tikal and see those amazing pyramids. You need to take them to Antigua to see the colonial history. You need to take them to Lake Atitlan, the most beautiful lake in the world that has Mayan indigenous communities that are making textiles and chocolate and coffee and all of this sort of thing. And I listened to her. So from that point on, I was sure to take donors to see some of the beautiful places. And when possible, I took the children as well. I remember one donor for Food for the Hungry. He supported a child. This is a child care organization. There was something special about him. I did a little research and I found out that his grandfather was the owner of one of the largest chemical companies in Philadelphia, and they had this massive foundation. And the foundation bylaws would preclude it from giving overseas unless one of the family members had a particular interest. So as I was reading the newspaper to go visit him in north of Philadelphia, I read that the foundation had given $600,000 to build a canoe landing on the river that goes through Philadelphia. And I said, Bill, let's just close our eyes for a second and think about what would happen with $600,000 at Food for the Hungry. And eventually, he was interested in taking his children overseas to see the work firsthand, so I took them to Nicaragua. And I took them up to some of the villages. The children interacted with one another. They had a great time. They were playing hide and seek. And of course, the kids are always asking these difficult questions. Why does everybody live in one room? Why don't they have any windows? Why isn't there a chimney? Where do they shower? And I remember when I was leaving my last years with this organization, we received a $25,000 gift, and nobody knew where that came from. Well, this was from the 8-year-old child that I took on this trip, and he was now, 19, and guess what? He had his own family trust.
Mark Walker was a Peace Corps volunteer in Guatemala and has spent over 40 years helping disadvantaged people in the developing world. He has managed programs with CARE and Plan International. For more than 30 years, he has raised funds for organizations such as Food for the Hungry, MAP International, Global Brigades, and Make-A-Wish International. He's also a longtime active Rotarian. As a writer, Mark has published 2 books, Different Latitudes, My Life in the Peace Corps and Beyond, and My Saddest Pleasures, 50 Years on the Road. He's a contributing writer for Review Magazine, The Author's Show, The Wanderlust Journal, and The Literary Traveler. His column, The Million Mile Walker Review, What We're Reading and Why, is available online. His articles have been recognized with numerous honors. He's also the recipient of the Service Above Self Award from Rotary International. He's an active member of PEN International, the Professional Writers Group, and the Phoenix Writers Club. For more about Mark, his books, and his social media platforms, please visit millionmilewalker.com. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it. If you haven't followed us already wherever you get your podcasts, please do so. Please leave a rating. It means a lot. And not only that, but it helps get those algorithms moving this show to the ears that need to hear it, or that we would like to hear it. You can find out much more by visiting our website at softpowerfulstories.org. There you can learn more about our guests, see pictures of them in action, find out the music that we use, and, of course, leave feedback. We would love to hear from you. Our show's logo was designed by Kate Furby, and my friend Kathy Zilski voices Dubious Aunt Deb, who, of course, she is nothing like, but she does it perfect. My name is Christopher Wurst. I'm the host and producer of Soft Powerful Stories. Until next time.